wake up every day, and my prayer to God is very simple. God, please give me the ability to show me where you want me to go today.
Right.
He sets my destiny.
Right.
And that to me, is I don't worry about much anymore. I just know you're putting me here for a reason.
All right, Mr. Jim Wright, thank you for joining me in the den. You are the Texas Railroad Commissioner. Did I say that correctly?
That is correct.
All right.
Well, actually, it's the Railroad Commission of Texas.
The Railroad Commission of Texas.
I am one of the 3 commissioners that are statewide elected to be on the board that oversees what we do at the Railroad Commission.
Which has nothing to do with trains.
It did in the original beginning. The Railroad Commission is the oldest state agency in Texas. It started in 1891, and it started out in necessity over the trains because trains were building tracks. And, of course, the way we used to move product around was buggies and horses and those kind of things. And then train came along where you could move those things greater distances, get people to greater markets. But the train magnates also recognized that they could take and charge just as much as it almost cost them to, they basically were taking all the profits from people that were, building product to ship and sell into the market.
Mm-hmm.
So the agency was created out of necessity to help set tariffs so that it was fair for the people that were building products and needed to get them to markets. And that's really what helped Texas grow, is starting with the railroads. And if you take the concept of what railroads are doing, they were hauling a product generated from one area to the marketplace. And in 1901, we discovered our first oil deposits that we had in Texas. And naturally, it was more economical to ship that product via pipeline than it was in wooden barrels on a train even. So since that was also considered a common carrier, we got pipelines put underneath our agency. We basically were the agency that regulated all tariffs for any form of transportation up until the mid-90s, even in trucking, if you were doing something intrastate. And it wasn't until 2005 that we lost our authority over the railroads. It wasn't that we lost it. It's just the oil and gas industry grew so large and so big, it was more than our agency could actually begin to even manage. We have so much production in Texas today that it's a lot.
So who came in to help out with that?
Texas Department of Transportation took over all of the trains, and then trucking was deregulated, so there really isn't any regulation over tariffs for trucking anymore. They allowed everybody that wanted to be in the trucking business an opportunity to be there, which it kind of set the free market side of that, which really I think worked out a lot better than us having to set tariffs. Today you got very competitive rates in all areas of transportation because of the free market.
Good. So trucks are still a big way to move oil.
And it is whenever you don't have the infrastructure, which is a whole different issue. Some of the things that we face today, it depends on how the pendulum of politics swings, right? And there's a lot of obstruction whenever it comes to putting pipelines in the ground today, and a lot of regulations. It takes a long time to permit, get the right of ways to move that product to where it needs to be. So, that's certainly the safest and the most economical way to move it.
Yeah. So which is pipeline?
Yeah, but as you develop and you've got to meet the mandates of your oil leases, which require you to drill in certain times. Not necessarily is that infrastructure always there for the oil or the gas. So trucks then become the only mode of transportation that carries that product out.
But they're more dangerous.
Well, naturally. I mean, anything over the road today, I feel like is more dangerous than a pipeline.
But the regulation is coming over the pipelines, not necessarily the trucking?
Well, trucking is regulated by the Department of USDOT, where they have to meet certain safety requirements, and their drivers have to be certainly trained.
So what are some of the issues that people or the government might have with pipelines?
It's the NIMBY effect, right? Not in my backyard. And you see that more and more. And you've also seen a move here recently in just fossil fuels in general. all the things that you see in the media that says that fossil fuel it's deteriorating our atmosphere, it's making our planet hotter, we're going to be, not be able to survive with all the greenhouse gas emissions, all the things that you've seen in the media, which is not necessarily true. What happens in the oil and gas industry is we create three things. Essentially, we have a lot of water that comes up with crude and natural gas. Then we have crude, then we have natural gas. Well, as I told you earlier, sometimes the infrastructure doesn't keep up the pipelines to get all of that to a market, especially when it comes to natural gas. Natural gas today trades at a very, very low number with the volume that we create. Economics have to make pretty good sense to build a pipeline to a particular well, to gather that gas, to put it in a transmission line to get it to a market. So the normal practice has always been to flare that gas until that infrastructure can catch up. And that's been the concern from the environmental side, is that flaring is actually deteriorating our ozone, our atmosphere.
Okay.
But what they don't tell you and what people don't realize is when you burn natural gas, you create CO2. Most of our atmosphere is CO2. CO2 is what promotes plant growth and everything else. So I'm not sure that I believe in the science. When I look at what we're seeing today, and I look at history, I think we're repeating cycles. We have times that are colder, we have times that are hotter. And if you look back, as far back as you can look, when we started tracking what temperature was, there were times that we were hotter than today. Mm-hmm. I'm certainly not a scientist of any kind, but I do think there are other factors besides flaring natural gas that's causing the hotter conditions and the drought conditions that we're seeing today, because I think there's other impacts on that, such as the Earth revolves around the sun, correct? It's daylight and it's dark every day, which means the Earth continues to go round and round. Mm-hmm. Does that Earth sometimes get a little bit off its axis? From what I was taught in school, yes, it does kind of swivel on its axis, like its bearings are sometimes getting very loose. Mm-hmm. So is the Earth tilting more toward the sun during this time, where 10 or 20 years from now, maybe it tilts kind of away from the sun? So I think it's just part of what we naturally go through and what we're going to experience being on this earth.
Yeah. So does the Railroad Commission look into any of that science at all?
Definitely. Flaring's been a big concern, and I hear it from, my constituents. People in Texas have a concern, and they, some of that science makes sense to them. I'm just one individual. I think that there is some validity to what man does to our atmosphere with greenhouse gas emission. And I certainly want to hear those concerns, and I want to react to those concerns. So when I came into office with flaring, what I asked my fellow two commissioners was, guys, before we allow this flaring, before we allow exceptions for the flaring, I want to make sure that producer can tell me when he's going to be connected, when he can start sending that gas to market. I didn't do that so much in concerns to what it was doing to our atmosphere and flaring. I did it because I didn't want to waste our natural resources.
Right.
And so today we do not allow those exceptions, and the industry actually got the message very quickly. Today I don't get an application for an exception unless they can show me exactly when they're going to be connected, and I will not allow them over 1 year to do that. Mm-hmm. So if you look at when I came into office 5 years ago, and the volume of flaring that we're having, which was a volume today, we're producing a lot more natural gas than we were 5 years ago. We were about 6% volume of being flared. Today we're less than 0.5%, and we have a lot more volume. Yeah. So what plan we put in place is working. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to not have upsets or a valve that fails, or there's many things that can happen on a well site. And flaring is a part of a necessary evil there, right, to keep somebody from being blown up from the volatility what natural gas brings. Mm.
So when you say the pipelines and the trucks, they take the product to market, what market are we sending all that stuff out to today, from Texas?
We've been very blessed. We had some hiccups during the Biden era whenever it came to permitting facilities that could process this gas. Today we send the vast majority of that gas, not just for our own needs that we have here in the nation, but we send that gas abroad to places like Europe and Asia and China, and we call that liquefied natural gas. And we have plants that liquefy that gas, put it into boats that can carry it and deliver it as a liquefied natural gas, and then it's returned back into a gas that they use.
Is that the only way we ship it? Do we have pipeline that goes across the ocean, or
Not that I'm aware of.
no? Is that
I
something
mean,
that
there are gathering lines that come out of there from offshore rigs that will come onshore, but we have no pipelines that are reaching other nations via water. Now, Mexico, we sell a lot of natural gas to them. Also, we do that via pipeline.
Okay, so everything we send out is ships. So in Texas, does that go to Corpus Christi?
Most of that does. Corpus Christi today, and a lot of people don't know this, Corpus Christi is the nation's leading hub, leading port when it comes to the volume of natural gas and crude oil that's shipped abroad.
Wow.
They lead the nation.
Are we capitalizing that economically in Corpus?
We are. I mean, I'm very proud of what Corpus Christi has done in collaboration with our port that we have here. I think people experience it every day. You drive over a brand new bridge, a lot higher bridge than the older bridge. Well, the reason for that bridge was so that we could bring bigger ships in and load more volume, which decreased travel cost for those products to go where they were needed and being used. So it put us at a little bit better economic advantage in allowing that. And the port also was successful in getting together the funds to deepen the channel to accommodate these larger ships to come in.
Good. When did that take place? Did that just...
It's been a process over the years, but the bridge, as most people know, was just completed here in the last, I think, 5 or 6 months.
Right.
And then the channel just completed here in about the last 7 or 8 months.
Oh, really? Okay. So it wouldn't have made a difference if the bridge would have been done faster, probably in the date that they had said that it would, because the...
there has to be some harmony there too.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit in the beginning about pipelines and how difficult that is to actually put a pipeline in the ground and take stuff from where it's generated to where it needs to be, used.
Right.
So that's a little bit of the suppression in what we're experiencing anywhere, is getting that stuff shipped to places like Corpus Christi so it can be exported to other markets. So that has a little bit of bearing on what we could really be doing out of Corpus. Of course, we've got a pretty friendly federal level of regulation today with the new administration that is seeking to try to get these projects where they can be approved faster from a permitting process. We at the commission, since I've been there, have been looking at trying to streamline the permitting process, and I call it common sense. I had taken away a lot of the red tape that was really kind of unnecessary, led by things that you see in the media where, I get disappointed sometimes in the media because they don't tell people the whole truth. They tell them what they think they can sell their self for.
So what kind of limitations was the previous administration putting on the oil market that this new administration is actually releasing?
Two big examples. Number one is that they put a total ban on federal lands being used to produce oil or gas. That was during the Biden administration. Secondly, they put a moratorium on anything that was being permitted as far as LNG processing plants for us to export our gas to other markets. So what they were actually doing is they were getting our competition a kind of a leg up, where they were capturing more of the world market side of things.
And who was doing that? Who was the leading?
Places like Russia and Venezuela and Saudi Arabia.
Why would our government do that?
I don't know. I can't get inside somebody's head for that. I think sometimes when you look at politics and people look at who they expect to lead, and be elected to do the things people need to do, sometimes they don't really know what that job requires. Of course, there's a lot of different jobs when you sit in Congress or you sit in a state capitol as a representative or senator. your background may be a dentist or a lawyer. How much do you really know about oil and gas?
Yeah.
So that's some of the problems there. It's not that they're bad leaders.
Just incompetent.
Well, I wouldn't say incompetent either. It's just I don't know everything about everything. I grew up in the oil and gas world. I wouldn't say that I would know how to operate on anybody's brain.
Yeah.
Right.
But whatever they were doing was having negative effects.
And it was led by constituency. So, I call it the woke side of things.
Okay.
You've seen over the past few years that you have this woke side that seems to be very anti-American.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think people are starting to wake up that America is probably, I consider the best country in this world. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
Right.
But I really enjoy waking up free
Yeah.
and having the freedom of choices.
Absolutely.
And I'm not real sure what other people think. I think today some of that result comes from we got a lot more people today than we had 50 years ago live in this nation. We've got a lot of different circumstances today. Economy has changed, and you see a lot of broken families. You see a family, and I don't think I know one that the mom and the dad doesn't have to both go to work to make ends meet.
Right.
Well, when that happens, I'm not sure that children are given a real strong ability without bringing something like God into their life.
Right.
To that, it just kind of, there's really no guidance there that I'm seeing. Not like it was when I was a kid many years ago.
Yeah.
Where my mom had the ability to stay home while my dad worked and teach us right from wrong.
Right.
And I don't blame the youth today at all. I just think it's a circumstance of where we are in the world today and what the economy is kind of dictating. So you got a lot of kids that feel like they've never gotten attention in their life. And I think there's many of them out there. So today, that they will go to pretty much any level to gain that attention. We saw it just here a month and a half ago in the murder of Charlie Kirk.
Right.
I mean, that was nothing but a man that evidently had a really bad childhood that was craving for attention.
Right.
And I think you're starting to see that more and more. So, when you look at how can we improve that, God's got to certainly be part of life.
Yeah, absolutely.
To do that. And then the economy's got to be part of that equation also.
Right.
So, and when I look at my job and what I do, when you look at what oil and gas brings for the state of Texas, I feel like that is one of the biggest drivers. In fact, it is oil and gas for the state of Texas is 38% of our GDP. That's a big chunk. Mm-hmm. So, the more I can drive that, I think the more jobs I can get offered, the better paying jobs, which will start allowing maybe one of the parents to work and not the other.
Right, right. Yeah, we need industry like that. I know you've been here in Robstown. About a year or two ago, they were having so much debate about the Avena ammonia plant project. People were so against it. I'm like, well, it could kill people. Amusement parks kill more people than an ammonia plant does.
I say this all the time. You take a chance in life from pretty much the moment you wake up every morning.
Right.
If you get in that car, you're taking a chance.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that, again, people have not been well educated on here in just the past few years is what does industry mean for communities? Like the ammonia plant that we saw that was coming here to Robstown and may still come yet to Robstown. What that means is that there's more jobs, good paying jobs. So what does that mean? Well, whoever's taking those jobs needs a place to live, a place to grow their family.
Right.
And that ripple effect is for everyone. Because, if your housing market need or your housing markets are in demand, your housing prices go up. Mm-hmm. Pretty much everything's relevant when industry moves in. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to do a lot better job of educating people on what happens when industry is not allowed to move in. Right. I can tell you for sure, communities dry up and they go away.
And that's really what we're seeing, or we've been seeing here in Robstown. There is no industry, and I believe this Avena plant was an opportunity to get something in our community that could help the residents, that could help the schools. But there's people who kind of like stoke fear and all these fear mongering that takes place in order to keep that industry from coming in.
You know, a lot of people don't know this, but if you really dive into the people that are against the Avena project, you'll see where a lot of that is fueled by people like Greenpeace or environmental justice or those. And then you even dive deeper. Where does the funding come for those people to get people together and riled up, kind of like you've seen here? It usually comes from a competitor.
Yeah.
With the Avena plant, there's another competitor out there that provided a lot of funding for that. So
yeah.
It's people really need to dive into what really is going on, not just look at things on the surface.
Some people, I think, in our community are very trusting of people that come and tell them, even if it's bad news, they get scared and they trust them, and they're not accustomed to doing their own research. And I kind of understand that.
It's so influential today because everyone has such easy access to social media.
Right.
And the stuff that gets spread around on social media, I can't say it enough that don't believe everything you read. Don't believe everything you hear. If you're interested in something, be interested in it. Right. Otherwise, I don't think you should have an opinion about it unless you take the effort to know about it.
Right. And I think anytime you think of Texas, you think oil. Like even as far back as when I was a kid and we were watching Dallas after the Dukes of Hazzard, we would watch Dallas, and the intro to Dallas was oil wells and, all that kind of good stuff. And so when you think Texas, you think oil. Oil is a huge part of not just the Texas economy, but the country's economy. We're producing most of the oil in the country, aren't we?
Yeah, to give you an exact figure, based on 2024, we produce 42% of what our country produces in oil. We produce some 32% of all of our natural gas. So, Texas leads in that. If Texas with its oils, God blessed us with those natural reserves.
Right.
If you look at Texas' economy today, Texas alone is the 8th largest economy in the world. Fixing to surpass France if we keep on the trajectory that we are today.
Wow.
I mean, it's amazing what oil and gas has done for Texas.
Yeah, so how much oil does the United States? Is like 4-point-something billion gallons of oil?
No. Just in Texas alone, today we produce 6 million barrels a day of oil.
6 million a day.
Right, and about 36 trillion cubic feet of natural gas.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a lot of product.
Yeah, so we're almost at half of what the United States is producing.
42%, right?
Texas
in 2024, just the taxes that were paid off of generating gas and selling and oil and selling it, the state itself received $27 billion into its coffers from those taxes.
Wow.
And those taxes go for improvements in schools, roads, our police force, and our emergency fund that we have.
Wow. So how do we compete in the world? Just Texas, not the United States, but just Texas.
That's been a huge thing on my mind here for the past couple of years. And I think if you look back in history, in the 70s, we drilled just kind of a simple well. We called it a conventional way of drilling, where if you could just imagine sticking a straw straight in the ground, we would surge through looking at geological data to try to find pools of oil and gas, and we would drill to that, and we would pump those pools. In the 70s, those started to diminish pretty much nationwide because that was the only technology to actually drill for oil and gas. So what happened is our federal government said, look, we're not exporting any more oil and gas because we need it here domestically. So they put a rule into effect where we couldn't export. And then around 2008, we had a new technological advance of what they call vertical drilling, where we were allowed now to go down not just straight with like a straw under the surface. We've got a straw that goes down and actually curves and goes into a longer span in a formation. And then on top of that, we started to blast, to frack those formations, to loosen the porous area so that the oil and gas could flow better. So today, that's what we're doing. It's called the shale revolution.
Yeah.
That's what's turned this around. And I don't know if you remember, if you're old enough to remember in the 70s, do you remember? No, you couldn't drive anywhere in the United States over 55 miles an hour.
Right. Yeah, I do remember
Because
that.
we did feel like we were running out of oil and gas.
Wow.
Well, it wasn't until, when the shale revolution came around 2008, it wasn't until 2016 that the federal government said, you know what, we're generating lots of oil and gas. We could be a world leader in this. So they decided to lift that embargo that allowed us to export those products. If you think about 2016, that's not been that far long, that's not that long ago. So everybody in this nation's kind of new to what is the world market. And I've taken a really hard look at that. I've reached out to the Qataris. I've reached out to Argentina, China, South Korea, different nations to say, hey, what could we do to provide more confidence in U.S.-based product coming to you? And, how can we do that? The biggest snag that I saw there was shipping. We had kind of one way to get to the West Asian countries was through the Panama Canal, which was a bottleneck for us. And so today, when you're looking at that, Mexico's looking at putting in their own kind of land-based canal where they're going to have rail and pipeline. So I think there's going to be some openings for us in that regard. And when I talk to the Qataris are in markets that we've never even had exposure to. But if you look at Qatar, they don't have a lot of oil. They're next to Saudi Arabia. They generate lots of natural gas there. But they have markets that we don't give either to. But what they've told me is we would like to be more of a turnkey provider to those markets. So we'd like to partner with you guys in Texas so that we could also sell crude oil to our buyers, and we'd like to buy some of your products, your jet fuel, your diesel, your gasoline, so that we'd be more of that turnkey provider to them, to those nations that we serve with our gas. That's the avenue that I'm trying to open up now. Given that we're kind of young in that space, that's something I've been very interested in. How do I expand that? Because we continue to grow immensely in the volumes of crude oil that we're producing in natural gas. And we need to continue to make sure that we look for steady, stable markets. What's happened to the oil and gas industry before is we've had such impacts from competition like OPEC, Russia, Venezuela, that they really have a big influence on those markets because they can dump a lot of product into those markets, which drives the price down. And I'm not saying that's competition is bad, but they drive that price so far down that we start to lay off people lose their jobs. I'm all for a steady rate relevancy. So if we're paying $3 a gallon for gasoline, we need to be making sure we're paying our people enough money to afford $3 a gallon. Right. I remember in COVID time when you saw gasoline go to $4 a gallon. I remember my employees at my company coming, hey, we need a raise because, $4 a gallon is a lot of money. And I agreed with them. I gave them all a raise. Well, gasoline is not $4 a gallon anymore. So I ask them, I joke with them all the time, can I have my raise back? I don't get my raise back.
Who has the most control of the pricing when it comes to dumping?
Right now, Russia and OPEC have the biggest influence on that.
Okay.
Russia you've seen President Trump try to go over and talk to the European nations to say, look, guys, you're buying products from Russia, their natural gas and their oil. Do you realize that you're funding a war in Ukraine? So I think he's making some headway with the European market. So they're starting to really take a look at that and taking a look at, accessing more of our product to serve what their needs are.
I mean, well, that's what he had done with Germany at that one time in his first term when he told them, we're protecting you from Russia, but you're buying their energy.
Yeah, I've been so happy to be able to work with the Trump administration. It has really, really been good. I think that we've got to make sure that the actions that are taken by all are going to be actions that can't be impeded by the future pendulum swing of politics.
Right.
Otherwise, you go back to the same old thing. And one thing I can tell you for industry for this nation, the biggest thing that they count on is just certainty in what regulations are. You know, you can't budget something that's going to take 20 years to pay back, knowing that you may have a new regime in place every 4 years. I mean, that's really tough. It's the same way at my agency. You know, consistency in what my rules are is huge.
What kind of stuff could the Trump administration put in place to assure that it remains, that it's not, it can't be changed?
Congress has that ability today. We're the Republican Party pretty much dominates that, and I consider the Republican Party, I'm one myself, being very conservative. And I think they learned their lesson from the previous administration about how important it is to make sure that whatever they do is set in some type of foundation.
Yeah.
And, I'm not saying that can't be undone, but I think there are ways that could make it hard to be undone.
Yeah.
And success in our economics, success in providing a better life for people is what keeps that from being undone.
Yeah.
And growing pains are tough. I think we have a lot of tough times to experience here in the United States because we owe a lot of money. In fact, we owe $36 trillion in natural debt.
Yeah.
National debt. Sorry about the cough.
How do you suppose that the tariffs are helping in that area as far as bringing down the debt?
Well, I've heard what everybody else has heard on the TV. I'm not an economic.
That's not your wheelhouse.
Economic guy, but I think when that started, if you look at some of the things that the Biden administration really tried to promote and do, one of them was called a carbon credit. So what they said is, look, guys, if you'll take and start capturing carbon out of the atmosphere or stop putting carbon into the atmosphere, there's a market that you could actually sell that captured carbon if you handle it and sequester it correctly into that will offset other people from putting stuff into the atmosphere. And I'll give you an example of what that means. Years ago, the Europeans started this way back. Whenever you used to see maritime ships and cruise ships going across the ocean and you saw nothing but black smoke coming out of them, they used to burn a really dirty fuel oil. That's what their engines ran on. Well, those ships would park in a European country, and the European country said, "Look, you're screwing up. You're putting smog into our atmosphere. If you want to park here, you're going to have to offset that smog by paying us." So they came up with this carbon credit concept. And that's generally what that means. So when you ask me about tariffs, I think that, again, I don't know a whole lot about that personally, but what I do know is I think that we should have probably put more emphasis on the carbon credit market, because the people that are not doing anything about cleaning up the atmosphere today are people like India and China. Well, who's India and China? They have a very good economy. Why do they have a very good economy? Because they sell most of their products to us.
Yeah.
So, if you're going to sell your products to us, I want to kind of be like the European nations. That's what they're saying today. We want to buy your product, but we want to make sure that you're producing that product responsibly. And, or we're not going to buy your product, which is the same way I think we ought to have done with India, China, people like that count on us for their economic success to say, look, if you're not going to do your part in this, then you need to buy carbon credits. I think that would have opened up a big new revenue source for us here in the United States, because there's really no choice. I mean, we're the people they count on for that economic success. So, tariffs I think are good. But the problem with tariffs is I think it eventually works a two-way street. If I tell you, hey, I'm going to charge you a tariff and I need to buy something from you, you're going to tell me, hey, I need to charge you a tariff. So, that's what I see kind of going back and forth now.
But aren't we already paying high tariffs to those countries that are...
No, sure. I mean, if I went to you and said, I'm going to force a 50% tariff on products that you want to sell me and then vice versa, what are you going to tell me? I mean, I don't know that we've gained a lot of ground there, but I hear it on the news that we are. But again, I look back at the carbon credit market, because carbon credit market is, I think, more palatable for people, because it seems to be a huge concern of, what is carbon dioxide doing to our atmosphere, and we have spent tons of money trying to make efforts to clean that up. Yeah. But when we make those efforts, and I'll give you an example because it's proven, you can research it. if we take 1 ton of carbon out of our atmosphere, China puts 2.
Yeah.
And in that same time period. And I tell people all the time, do you realize that our atmosphere just isn't over the United States, it's over the entire world?
Right. Yeah, that's why those all those climate things that they were trying to put in place, the Biden administration, and even before Biden, I think Obama was putting. I don't remember what it was called. That if it was a treaty or if it was the green.
It's called the Green New Deal.
The Green New Deal.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that, there's a lot of things in there that are not true. But and like I said, I'm not sure the science is right on greenhouse gas emissions, but I know one thing, we continue to spend a lot of money on that, not because, most of those things have been rolled back by the Trump administration, but what hasn't been rolled back is you have places like Germany and Europe that are saying, look, you want to sell us your product? You're going to certify that you're selling us a clean product. Mm-hmm. So the people that are producing natural gas, as for instance, to sell to a lot of the European countries today, we have to certify that. And that means that producer's got to certify that he's not flaring over a certain amount of gas into the air, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, the carbon credit market, I think, would have been palatable on both sides. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, that seems to be what I hear concerns from most people. Mm-hmm. So, I even say today, when my friends in Washington, we need to sit down at a table and we need to start being seriously, talking about that as we move through the future.
Do you think that'll happen?
Yeah, I think so. I'm honored enough, I'm privileged enough to have a pretty good relationship with some of the people in Washington.
Oh, good.
It just seems like I've only got 2 hands and they're both full all the time.
So when it comes to oil and gas, I know Corpus Christi is having an issue now with water. We haven't had, we don't get the water that we need. And, they've been throwing around the idea of a desal. For whatever reason, Corpus Christi can't make a decision to save their lives. And I don't know whether it's good or bad. What are your thoughts?
Here's what I've seen. And I talk to council members and to the mayor a lot over there, especially about water, because, again, Corpus Christi is the biggest export in the nation for products that I regulate. Mm-hmm. And what I've seen in that desal permit that they got, which, by the way, I worked very hard to help them get personally with the EPA and with TCEQ, is they were told in the beginning that they thought that thing was going to cost them about $222 million. And then it moved to $750 million, and then it moved to $1.2 billion. Mm-hmm. I don't blame any of them for saying, wait, hold up, let's figure this thing out. In fact, I have suggested to them that, if those costs are escalating that high, maybe you ought to look at a public-private partnership, because you could take somebody under a public-private partnership, put it out for bid and say, what would you charge me to produce 1,000 gallons of potable, clean water? And go out for bid for that. You pay for the infrastructure. You pay to operate. Call it a public-private partnership. Then we don't have to worry about the debt that we have to service. Right. I know that Alice is a very good example of that. Mm-hmm. Alice was having water issues. They went out and they dug her some deeper wells, which were in a brackish water. Was that what, Seven Seas? Seven Seas, mm-hmm. That's correct. And Seven Seas came in and gave them a very competitive rate. I'm not promoting Seven Seas at all. I'm just saying, as an example, that's a public-private partnership that works for Alice. And I do think that is something that Corpus needs to really put a really lot of emphasis on, is at least researching what that looks like.
Is that what Clayburgh is doing also?
That's what I've heard. I have not met with anyone down there and verified that. Seven Seas has told me that they've been working with Clayburgh, but I don't know that that's a done deal yet. Irregardless, today, what we know is we're not getting the rains, especially anywhere west of the 98th meridian, which is pretty much half of Texas west. Mm-hmm. A lot of communities are suffering, like Corpus Christi. Yeah. So what does that mean? It means that we're going to have to drill wells which when you drill wells, you get into water that's not consistent with the way you treat water to deliver it that people drink. So your cost of treatment is going to eventually go up doing that. Of course, we know desal, you got to treat the ocean water before you're able to drink that, or you're able to use it somewhere. It's salt water.
Yeah.
And we know that the cost is going to go up to have that water available, correct?
Right.
So what we also have to stay cognizant of is, what is that cost going to do to our economic success in Corpus Christi? Because, industry looks for a place that is conducive for them. What is my infrastructure going to cost me? Well, when you're competing with people like Houston, which seems to get rain every day,
Oh, yeah.
or Louisiana that gets rain every day,
Yeah.
you have to be cognizant of that. How do we keep competitiveness in that water market? And what I have been trying to talk to the city about is, I have a problem with water in the oil and gas industry. A lot of people don't know this, but I just told you earlier, we produce 6 million barrels of crude every day.
Right.
I have what
pull water out.
What did I tell you comes with it? Water,
Yeah, water.
natural gas, and oil. And the people don't realize that for every barrel of crude, I get about 5 barrels of water. So if you do the math, that's 5 times 6 million is 30 million barrels of water every day that I'm managing. Where does that water go? It gets re-injected into the ground.
Really? I was
Yes.
going to ask you, what do y'all do with that water?
And with the new shale revolution, remember I was telling you, now we're doing horizontal drilling and we're blasting these really tight formations. That's where that water came from. But the problem is you can't push that water back through those tight fractures that we're blasting, that we're fracking. So we're having to put it in different formations. We're putting it back from where it didn't come from. So what's happening, and what most people know, in West Texas, whereas most of our oil and natural gas comes today, the Permian and the Delaware, is that we've had lots of earthquakes. So we have done the data, we've done the research, and it showed that that volume of water that we're putting in those deeper formations closer to fault lines is putting a lot of pressure on those fault lines, causing the earth to shift. That's what's causing the earthquakes. We know that. We've set up curtailment now where we've said, okay, no more deep injection in a lot of the areas out here. You're going to have to go shallow, above the producing formation. Well, what's in those shallow formations? Tons of old, remember I was telling you about the straw goes into the surface? Mm-hmm. There's tons of old legacy wells out there. And there's straws that go into those formations. So as you increase the pressure in that formation, water is going to seek the path of least resistance. Right. A lot of these wells are very, very old. A lot of the integrity of the casings, we don't know. I mean, we have literally over 100,000 of these type wells that exist throughout Texas. So what I don't want to cause is overpressurization that may hurt groundwater. So, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to say, pretty soon, you can't put 20 ounces in a 12-ounce glass.
Right.
We're going to have to figure out another use of this water. Technology, like I said earlier, has come so far today. Economics are working to where we can actually treat that water to levels where you can drink it, and the economics work. So if my oil and gas industry needs a place for their water, that means that water is almost free to communities like Corpus Christi that could use it. And plus, we have a lot of rivers throughout Texas that lead to places that are west of the 98th meridian that can help us deliver that water. Yeah. And that to me is the water source that helps offset the cost of these newer water sources, which keeps us competitive with the rest of the state or bordering or competitive other states.
So that water, would it be enough to take care of us, or it's just an addition?
I just got through telling you I've got 30 million barrels a day.
How many does Corpus use a day?
Right now, Corpus is on the trajectory, from what they've told me, to in 2035, I think, to be somewhere around 150 million gallons a day. So you divide that by 42. That's in my world, that's hardly nothing compared to what I produce in produced water.
Well, that's pretty good. Yeah. And how do you think that they'll run with that? That they'll tap into that?
I have got everybody that I've talked to on council and the mayor certainly want to continue to investigate that, which I think is the best we can ask for today. You know, I'm encouraging them to meet with some of the water people that are treating water currently. 3 years ago, I started a program with the commission. We kind of a program that didn't require a permit. It was just a way of seeing if we really could treat this water and use it for irrigation.
Right.
I've got 6 applicants that have been doing that now for quite a while. We've been able to take the natural vegetation in some of the areas in West Texas and actually double the amount of cattle that we have been normally running. When you look at that, it's a 100% increase in cattle production. Crops, it's you know, there's been a lot of analysis. There have been a lot of samples to make sure we don't get any type of accumulation, that we're not hurting the plant and the plant's not accumulating something that would hurt you in the future.
Right.
I mean, there's been tons and tons of money, tons and tons of research that's been done on this. And I can sit here for days and give you the details on that. But what that means is it can be done.
And what kind of time frame is that doable?
Pretty far down the road now. We've got 6 applicants that have, you know, I don't govern water that a municipality would receive or a farmer uses on its field. That's not under my purview. That's under the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. Well, there's 6 applications that have gone to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality to use treated produced water to either irrigate with or to put into a river. Right now, all of those are looking at dumping that water into the Pecos River because that's the closest thing to West Texas.
So what is in that water that needs to be it needs to be filtered out?
You hear a lot of stories, you know, a lot of people that are anti-industry altogether, you know, and saying it's radioactive. That's not necessarily true. Right. You know, they're saying that it has lots of heavy metals in it. Well, it has metals in it, but it has valuable metals in it. And if you accumulate that volume of water into one area, I think it starts to look like the economics of removing the lithium in it for batteries becomes an economic success because we've talked to many of them. And part of that lithium process of removal is a process that is where they put in the water, they extract all the metals. They pull those metals out, and then they go through a processing to pull the lithium out of it. So I think, you know, that's a good thing to help our economics grow. And then the third thing is what we call total dissolved solids, which is basically salt.
Salt.
You know, the produced water compared to the ocean water is usually 20 to 30,000 parts per million, what they call total dissolved solids. We're on the average of about 120,000 total dissolved solids. Not a big difference when you look at injection. You know, when I started to see seismicity happening in West Texas and the Delaware, it was when we were just starting to exceed about 10 million barrels of injection. So if I can take away 20 million barrels today, and I can start to remedy some of the drought conditions west of the 98th, I mean, doesn't that make common sense to people?
Yeah.
You know, and do it safely. But where I was going with TCEQ, that ball's in their court. We've got 6 applicants that have applied. They've given some review applications back to the applicants, and they're reviewing what the standards would be that they would have to meet to put it into our rivers. You know, what I don't want to see, you know, I love the people in the Pecos are going to get water because that's going to end up in the valley. That joins the Rio Grande. Yeah. What I need for our community is I need a pipeline that takes us to the heads of the Nueces River. We need water here.
Right.
So, you know, I'm glad to see that legislation, this last legislative session, created a thing called Senate Bill 7, where now they are going to allow $1 billion annually to be used for growing the infrastructure and other water sources for people in Texas. So that money is going to be there. It's not a money that you necessarily have to go to borrow. It's just money to make sure that we've got sources that we can count on. So the money's there. You know, my talks with Corpus has been, let's take a look at that. You know, maybe you need to build the pipeline and you be a public-private partnership in West Texas with one of these companies that are treating this water. And that's a way to mitigate what the economics are going to look like when you do determine what desal is going to eventually be, or pulling up this water from these aquifer sources. I'm a little scared of pulling water from our aquifer sources because I think it's going to have some bearing on groundwater sources. So, I'm more about oceanic desal and about using produced water.
Yeah.
I would rather leave our aquifers alone.
Right. Yeah, it's been a fight out there. I know it's starting to get even more and more heated about that desal. We got together this past Sunday at Annabelle Baptist Church, the pavilion of several churches together, and we prayed
Familiar
for
with it?
rain.
Yes.
We're really believing that God would do something supernatural. And one of the interesting things in our group chat of pastors, one of the pastors said that he prayed that God would even just bring rain, even if he doesn't want to throw it from the air, that it would come from the ground. So as you're talking about these other sources, it kind of like triggered that memory of that text that God can bring water from anywhere he wants to. I pray that, there be other avenues through which we get water, because it's kind of horrible, even for us that have cattle and, we're trying to grow our grass and to be able to feed our cattle. If there's other avenues to get water, that would be amazing.
The water the volume of water that we need is going to be somewhere coming from beneath what our water wells are in. We can't deplete that water source. So, we're going to have to drill into some aquifer. Well, as you start to pull millions and millions of gallons out of those aquifers, you start to concentrate whatever contaminants may be in there. So you may pump good water for a while, but you're going to build up to where you're going to eventually have to really do some tremendous treating of that water, and you're also depleting those aquifers. If we do not get any more rain, that's what charges those aquifers.
Yeah.
So, I think we've got a lot of water, but we've got to figure out how we're going to do that safely.
Yeah.
And economically and in surety.
Yeah.
God's doing what God's doing for a reason.
Right.
And maybe he's telling us, don't depend on me for rain all the time, guys. Stand up and be big boys and figure out how to make this work.
Yeah, I guess so. Like he sometimes shows us avenues for our resources that we don't see.
I wake up every day and my prayer to God is very simple. God, please give me the ability to show me where you want me to go today.
Right.
He sets my destiny.
Right.
And that to me, is I don't worry about much anymore. I just know you're putting me here for a reason.
So that's a huge benefit to us as believers. We have resources that are not of this world. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we don't tap into that. We don't pray that God would give us that supernatural wisdom.
I wish people could see what I've seen God do, and I really wish they knew how amazing God is, and what He really does to help you every day.
Yeah, He does. He does. Give me an example of what you've seen God do, because even when we were talking about asking God for resources to show us resources, we look at the peanut. I think it was George Washington Carver that asked God, give me wisdom when it comes to peanuts. And God just opened up so many avenues of what could be done with the peanut. We don't really draw on God that way. And I'm glad to see that there's somebody in a position like yours that does think about pulling on that resource.
You asked Pastor why I really rely on God more than I think I have in all of my life. About 8 years ago, we had a horrible accident that happened in our family, and it did change the conditions of the way we live today dramatically. And the cause of that was from illegal aliens being transported into this country. Mm. For the first couple of days, all I could think about was revenge. Mm. I mean, I was really upset about that. And I thought, I need to go ask God for help. And I went into a chapel and I got on my knees and I said, God, I don't ask often, but I really need your guidance now. And He did that for me. And I think that's what kind of drove me to wanting to be in a higher political office, so that I would have some influence on what was going on in our illegal people that were coming over here and causing havoc for people like it did me in my family. And I think I really haven't done much, but do you see what's going on today? So tell me, how does God work?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the best example I can give you.
Yeah. Yeah. God says, do not repay evil with evil, but repay it with good. He says, vengeance is mine. And sometimes when he says vengeance, it doesn't necessarily mean he's going to kill our enemies, but he has a way of reaching them sometimes and providing ways so that we are recompensed in some way or another, because they're God's children too, right? And sometimes we look at ourselves and we understand we're God's children. We can get angry at people who do us wrong, but God loves them just as much as he loves us. And
about 6 years ago, when I first got my first opportunity to meet Governor Abbott, I was telling him the story and what happened with illegal aliens in our family, and it was shortly after that he started busing them to sanctuary cities.
Yeah.
I looked up and I said, "Thank you, God." I didn't make a lot of effort there. I just told the story.
Yeah.
And it's just evolving. Not that I want any mankind to hurt at all, but when you break the law, there's consequences for that. And if you think about illegal immigrants, you're using that word because they entered our country illegally.
Right.
There's no difference than me going and robbing a store by entering the country illegally.
Right.
So you're seeing the consequences of that, and I hope that there's good resolution for everyone. But I don't break the law.
Right.
The law is the law. That's what I've got to live by.
Some people look at that and they think that it's a lack of compassion, or that just because they're illegal, they're not causing these things. But breaking a law automatically kind of releases something into that atmosphere that is negative.
If you break the law, it already tells me that what type of human being you really are.
Right.
Period. I mean, I don't respect people that break the law in any regard.
Yeah, and it creates some kind of like domino effect.
I got away with this, so I can get away with that, and I can get away with this, and I can get away with it. We're seeing it today.
But it's like when you do something that breaks a lot, and even if I'm talking about scriptural, biblical, that you break something, it triggers other things in the atmosphere to people who might be innocent. We see it all through the Bible. When David sinned with Bathsheba, then her husband reaped the consequences of that. And then her firstborn son reaped the consequences of his negative action. He was a good man, but he did something that broke God's law, and it produced something negative in the atmosphere. So when they break the law, then they are creating a ripple effect. They are creating a domino effect that goes into the atmosphere that causes more wrong. As good-natured as those people may be, when they break something, it triggers and releases a negative wave.
Pastor, I'm very blessed today to be able to have lots of conversations with people with faith.
Yes, sir.
And I bring that up today, especially with the people like I started out with that are wanting attention and will go to any extreme to get that attention. I measure that back to Adam and Eve. Why did Eve pick that apple off that tree? Really, to me that was her way of saying, "You're giving this man all of the attention, God. I'm not getting any." And that's kind of what the Bible tells us. So I see that today is people are screaming for attention, and they'll go to any extreme to get that. And I think that's a pandemic that we need to recognize and start dealing with, because we see it happening more prevalent today than I've ever seen in my lifetime.
Yeah, and we're seeing a big move of God. Even with the death of Charlie Kirk, the response.
Oh, it's tremendous. And you're exactly right. It will take God to fix this problem. And I think he's working on that. It's like me and some of the things I did before things happened to me. My patience wasn't very good. I didn't have time to wait on what his remedies were. I tried to fix them myself.
Yeah.
And that never worked out.
I'm seeing people begin to talk about God more.
Yes, I am too.
I'm seeing God putting people in positions such as yours, Congress, and even in higher levels of administration. If you look at the memorial service for Charlie Kirk, how many of our politicians went up there and literally preached the gospel
No, I'm seeing it, and it's a great thing to see.
Mm-hmm.
I hope we keep on that trajectory throughout our future, because it's the only future that we have a chance at.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I believe, like I said, God is doing something. We have to ride this wave and take advantage of this window that God has given
Certainly.
us,
Yes.
and really take as much territory as we can for the kingdom of God. And I congratulate you for being in the position and that God has placed you there. You know, sometimes we don't know how we wound up in certain places, even though we work hard and do all that.
I don't question why I'm here anymore. I used to question why I was in places, but I don't anymore.
Yeah.
It's all God's will. Where He wants me to go is where I just prayed, please show me the direction.
Yes, sir.
Give me the ability to see it.
Yes, sir. I believe that God is doing that. I believe that He's going to continue to do that. I know you're running for re-election. Is that coming up pretty soon here?
Yeah, the primary is next March. You know,
right.
and people often ask me, saying, you're not out there beating the streets very hard. I didn't beat streets the first time I ran.
Right.
You know, I'll be very honest with you. I felt like that's where God wanted me, and I had no fear of losing. I knew I was going to win.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not sure about it this time that I have that same feeling, but like I tell everyone, it's not really up to anybody else. It's up to God.
Scripture says that God will open a door which no man can open, and He'll close a door which no man can close. But I believe that what God has for you, I believe that it's going to be fulfilled.
I hope and pray, and I know He will.
Yeah.
Wherever He puts me in the remainder of my life, it's good for man.
Amen.
Yeah, that's
Amen.
that's my hope. That's my prayer.
You mind if I pray for you? I don't know that I prayed for anybody at the end of a podcast, but you mind if I pray for you?
It'd be an honor.
Let's pray. Father, in the name of Jesus, I come before you, and I lift up Mr. Jim Wright before your presence. I pray, Lord, that as you have positioned him in this political atmosphere, in this leadership role, in this position where he can create a blessing for not only for our state, but also for our country. I pray, Lord, that you give him wisdom, which is not of this world. I pray that you order his steps, give him discernment through your Holy Spirit of decision, clarity of mind in this role that you've put him in. I pray your favor over him as he comes to this re-election process. I pray that your favor would be upon him. I pray that you put the right people in his path. And Lord, that you would utilize him as a vessel all the days of his life. Lord, I put him in your hands right now. In Jesus' precious, powerful, and mighty name we pray. Amen.
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 Thank you so much, Pastor.
Mr. Jim Wright, thank you for joining me in the den. It's been a blessing.
It has been an honor. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes, sir.